For joining. My name is Brendon Donoghue. I'm our Director of Sustainability Services here at Measurable. Just a few housekeeping items to start. This session is going to be recorded, and after the call's over, you'll receive a follow-up email that has the recording, as well as any key resources and links that we mentioned here today on the call. If you have questions as we go through this, please drop them into the Q&A box in Zoom. And at the end, we've reserved some time to do live Q&A. We might also answer in the chat as we're able. So I'm joined here today with my colleague, Mike Zatz, and he's going to kick off this presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Brendan. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy day to be with us here today. My name is Mike Zatz, and I am new with Measurable, just about 4 months with the company in the role of Senior Vice President, Global Data Ecosystem and Partnerships. Some of you may know me from my prior role, which was for 19 years. I was at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, managing the Energy Star program for commercial buildings, which included Energy Star Portfolio Manager, Energy Star certifications, and all the great work that we were able to do to support the real estate industry in improving the efficiency of buildings. So I was talking to Brendan and learned last week we were going to be doing this webinar, and so I said to him, over the years, a lot of people have asked me, how did we end up where we are today? How did these laws, these benchmarking laws, come about? So I suggested to him, maybe we should do a little bit of an overview and look back and see how these evolved over time. And everybody thought that was a great idea. So of course they asked me to do that. So I'm going to jump into that right now and give you a little bit of the history of these policies. That history starts in the 1990s, so quite a while ago. And back in the 1990s, the building owners and building operators essentially considered energy use and utilities to be uncontrollable expenses, if you will. Basically, you would use the building, you would receive an energy bill, you would pay the energy bill, and then you would do it all again. And Maria, I'm sorry, I don't know if we're having trouble. There we go. Now the slides are advancing. Thank you. So again, in the 90s, basically you just use the energy, pay the bills, and don't really worry about it. We go to the 2000s, really the beginning of the 2000s, in the year 2000. My colleagues at Energy Star, this was before I was with the program, came up with the great idea that, hey, maybe if we can encourage people to benchmark how much their building is using and give them a way to do that, maybe they'll see that there is something they can do to reduce the amount of energy they use and reduce their costs. So they introduced in 2000 the Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool, made it free. And what they found was that a number of companies started to benchmark voluntarily. This was largely larger office building owners, those who were more progressive and were already thinking about the environmental performance of their buildings. And then throughout the 2000s, the use of Portfolio Manager and the use of benchmarking grew. And we saw that more and more building owners were doing this. We hit around 2008, and there was a Great Recession. A lot of focus in the green building movement shifted from new construction over to existing buildings. And at the same time, as benchmarking was increasing, a number of cities and states started to do greenhouse gas emissions inventories to assess how much emissions were coming out of their cities. And what many people expected was that transportation was going to be the greatest source of emissions because we think about cars. But what a lot of these cities in particular discovered was that because of their urban nature, the vast majority of their emissions was coming from buildings, commercial and multifamily buildings. So in the late 2000s, they came up with the idea to start mandating transparency, which took us into the 2010s. And the first of these laws came about in 2008 with Washington, D.C. Actually, I should clarify that California actually passed the law around the same time, but the regulations didn't go in place for a little while. So DC was actually the first law to go into effect in 2008, followed by Austin, Texas, and New York City. And this essentially made it mandatory that buildings of certain sizes had to benchmark their energy use every year, report it to the city or the state, and then that would be made publicly available in most cases. So that continued throughout the 2010s, and more jurisdictions sort of jumped on board and required this. And then we got to the 2020s. And in the 2020s, I think some of these jurisdictions started to look at the results and they saw that, buildings were improving a bit and energy use and emissions were coming down some. And EPA had done some studies that showed that buildings that were benchmarking regularly were saving about 2.5% of energy use per year. But presumably somebody in these jurisdictions decided that was good, but it wasn't fast enough. And they came up with the idea for what are called building performance standards. And those are different from the benchmarking laws. The benchmarking laws just require you to benchmark and submit the data to the city or the state or the province, but you don't have to hit any level of performance. You could be good or you could be bad. Well, BPS take it to another level. And with a BPS, the cities are putting in place, or the states are putting in place caps on the amount of energy a building can use or the amount of emissions it can generate. And if you don't hit those caps, you might be subject to fines. So BPS aren't the focus of this webinar today, but it was important. I wanted to make that distinction for you. So that's sort of the history of how we got to where we are today. And if we take a look at where we are now, we have over 50 jurisdictions across the US and Canada that have benchmarking laws in place for commercial and multifamily buildings. One piece of good news is that they are all consistent in that they require the use of Energy Star Portfolio Manager to do the benchmarking, get the metrics, and report the data back to the jurisdiction. But that's really where the consistency ends. And in fact, what we see is increasing complexity as these laws have grown. The complexity starts with just the question of who needs to comply with these laws. The building size thresholds. Most of the laws required buildings 50,000 square feet and above to do this benchmarking, but over the years, those have come down, and many are now in the 25,000 square foot range. One more recent one has even dropped as low as 5,000 square feet. That's not common. It's like a large house in a lot of places, but it just shows you that how things are varying. There's also differences in what is required to be benchmarked and which types of buildings. Some jurisdictions require multifamily to benchmark and report back, but others don't. And similarly, a number of jurisdictions decided that they were very concerned about water consumption as well, so they've required water consumption to be benchmarked along with energy. More recently, the jurisdictions realized that the data that was being submitted to them was user input data, often not verified at all. And they, of course, want to have accurate information and want to be able to get accurate data about the emissions that are coming from their cities or their states. And so some jurisdictions have started to require that data be verified. But even within those, there are differences. Some require verification every 2 years, others every 5 years. That can differ. And there's also differences in who can do the verification, which professionals, which credentials are accepted for that verification. So this is just some of the differences. And as you can see, if you have a portfolio that spans across multiple jurisdictions, it's an awful lot to keep track of. And if you don't successfully keep track of it, you can be looking at fines and penalties that can reach into the thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, depending on where you're not in compliance. So with that overview, I just thought I would leave you with a few examples because I think a lot of people just sort of get this more quickly visually. I'm not going to go through each of these, but this shows you some of the differences that we see. I did want to point out two interesting things. First is if you look at Orlando and Miami, Florida. Let's say you're a regional owner and you have buildings in Florida. You may have some buildings that don't have to comply with any law, some that have to comply with Orlando, and some that have to comply with Miami. So it's important to know that the size thresholds for Miami and Orlando are different, and also the deadlines are different. So you got to make sure to keep track of that. And then when we look at Colorado, this is an interesting new trend that's happening much more around the country. And that is where a local jurisdiction will have a benchmarking law, but also the state that jurisdiction is in will have its own benchmarking law. So in this case, if you're a building owner and you have a 20,000 square foot building in Aspen, Colorado, you have to comply with Aspen's law, but you don't have to comply with the state of Colorado's law because that has a threshold of 50,000 square feet. But let's say your building in Aspen is 60,000 square feet, then you have to comply with both. And that's a separate process that has separate requirements, water for one of them, not for the other, and also very different dates, with Colorado this year in 2026 changing their deadline to be November 1st, whereas virtually every other jurisdiction in the country uses a deadline in the spring. So that's happening more and more. Colorado, interestingly, did just pass an ordinance or change to their ordinance that will in some cases recognize that if you've complied with the local law, you're deemed to be in compliance with the state law, but that doesn't exist for all jurisdictions and it doesn't exist for all states. So it's important to keep track of all of that. So anyway, I hope that overview gives you some context into why these laws are so complex and why it can be so difficult for larger portfolios. And with that, I'll pass it back to Brendon.
Thanks, Mike. Uh, so I wanted to dive in here to some specifics on what we see for the upcoming 2026 compliance season. There's a handful of new updates. This is not comprehensive, but I wanted to highlight some key updates. The first is on new ordinances. We see one in New Orleans, as well as in a couple smaller jurisdictions in West Hollywood and Santa Monica, outside of LA. And so that's sort of representative of a trend that we're seeing in these laws is that metro areas just beyond cities that have had ordinances in place for some time are adopting their own ordinances. Um, Also, we see a statewide ordinance in Maryland. This came into effect last year, but the deadline was pushed to later in the year. So I just wanted to highlight that in case that was uh, new to anybody. And then there are some updates to some longstanding benchmarking programs. So in Washington, D.C., that program is expanding their coverage to all buildings 10,000 square feet and above this year. So make sure to check out your buildings in DC if that might impact you. In Boston with the Birdo program, that as Mike mentioned, data scrutiny is becoming more and more apparent and frequent in these programs. And so they have a data verification requirement in 2026. That program requires this every 3 years. We also see the BPS standard coming into play for Birdo this year. In New York City, as you might be aware, Local Law 97 came into effect last year. That is New York's BPS requirement, and compliance was just due on December 31st. So just wanted to highlight that since it was pretty recent. So with that, what does an increasingly complex regulatory landscape mean for building owners and operators? Most portfolios are exposed to at least one, if not multiple jurisdictions, each one having its own set of rules, thresholds, and different data portals to navigate. Um, with that, companies that don't have a dedicated team or built-in automations around complying with these are at risk of missing deadlines, submitting incomplete reports, and exposing themselves to penalties. Even within a single ordinance, compliance can get complicated, and as scrutiny on the data and these reports grows, it's really important to be on top of this. Failure to comply and report to these today is rarely about a lack of intent, but more about just being aware and knowledgeable on what's required in today's environment. So this can all feel a bit intimidating, but we have a few key pillars to help make reporting season a success. And so I wanted to highlight what a successful reporting season might look like. The first piece is always to know your exposure. So as new ordinances pop up and thresholds change, just going into the year with a clear picture of what it is you have to do, where you have to comply is crucial. When you do that, you can manage the deadlines and not chase them. You don't want to end up in a situation with your back against the wall where you're chasing down hard to find utility data a week before the deadline. That's how you end up with violations and penalties, which when you're managing these and submitting reports early with plenty of time for data quality assurance, you can end up with no fines, no penalties. And then as filing requirements grow over time or your portfolio grows, your team is able to keep up. And so there's really two pathways to managing a reporting season. And you can think about this a little bit like filing your taxes every year. So you can do that yourself, manage it all in-house, or you can utilize a software solution or an expert to help you with your filing. And the specifics of your own company and organization and portfolio might inform which solution and pathway is best to take. So managing this internally, what's really important is to make sure you have dedicated ownership and someone with a really deep understanding of the ins and outs of each of these ordinances that you're exposed to. Managing that requires coordination across, like I said, a lot of different data portals. More and more of these programs have their own unique portals that you need to navigate for compliance today, and staying on top of deadlines, extensions, etc. Scaling as exposure to program grows with a DIY approach usually means a little bit more time and maybe even more headcount as more and more reports are required. So this option gives you a lot of control, but also a lot of operational burden in your approach to reporting season. On the other hand, there are software and service providers that can help provide end-to-end support, should that be the right fit for you and your organization. This solution comes with a dedicated sustainability reporting expert in your corner to help you navigate and complete all these reports. Gives you a single system for housing your data, tracking deadlines, and keeping records of your filings. Workflows will be standardized and automated, which allows you to scale without an increasing amount of effort as your portfolio grows in its exposure. So this solution has a much lower internal lift and much more predictability. So moving on, whichever pathway you and your organization take to filing, the first step is always knowing your exposure. Um, while all of these reports are ultimately submitted through Energy Star Portfolio Manager, that tool does not provide insight into what your exposure is across the portfolio. And so in just last year, Measurable launched our free solution. And one of the things we really wanted to do in this is to give organizations visibility into what their regulatory environment looks like. So Measurable's free solution is compatible with Portfolio Manager. We have a bi-directional sync. For those of you who already manage your energy data in Portfolio Manager, you're able to sync that into a free account within just minutes using your Energy Star login. You can scan the QR code here to get taken to our account sign up page. It's really easy. And if you want help, our support team is always ready to help you get your data in there. Once it is, we use your building's size, building type, and location to track your exposure to all North American benchmarking and BPS ordinances. Within the tool, we have links to each program's specific website. You can manually track your filing, whether it's in progress, exempt, if you received an extension, etc. And it really just allows you to centralize your own management of the different reports that you have to submit. So highly encourage everyone. It's completely free. And I think it's really a useful tool to starting to manage this. Moving to the next slide. The free tool offers a lot of help here, but some organizations really want that end-to-end support. And Measurable also has services to help you navigate and submit all of your requirements should you choose. So our services, we have a dedicated sustainability reporting team. Like I mentioned earlier, we cover all North American benchmarking ordinances. We submit thousands and thousands of filings every year across a range of different portfolios, from single building owners to really large multinational portfolios. Our services are completely end-to-end. We'll help you from implementation. We own and advise on data collection, do quality assurance, and we'll do the actual report submission should that be what you want in your services. And with our solution, you can ensure that all of your data is complete and accurate in your submission and not worry about any of those fines or uh, issues that come up with incomplete reports. So feel free to scan the code, or I think we're dropping a link in the chat as well. You're welcome to just fill out a quick form, and we can touch base about getting a quote and everything for your specific portfolio should you be interested. And just looking at the timeline here. So this is a bit of a generalization of what reporting season looks like. As Mike mentioned earlier, deadlines are different. Colorado's is now later in the year, but most of these deadlines are in Q2, kind of April through June. And so the time to create a plan is right now. Our team is hard at work helping our customers to make sure that all of their buildings are in Energy Star, getting data requests out there, and leaving plenty of time for quality assurance and not being backed up against the wall as these deadlines approach. So if you haven't already created a plan, now is the time. There's really no time to waste. The earlier you do this, the less stressful it is. And we are always happy to help here at Measurable. To help you out too, we've put together a bit of a checklist, just a few questions to ask yourself and assess your own readiness for the reporting season. So the main pillars are, do you know what your exposure is across the portfolio? What's the state of your data? Is it complete, accurate, auditable? And is it clear within your organization who owns this? What are their responsibilities? So we are also going to share a link to a downloadable version of this in the chat. Feel free to just download and utilize to help make sure that you're ready to tackle the season. And that wraps up what we had today. I want to again thank everybody for joining. Hopefully this was helpful and serves to get you ready for what will be a busy but hopefully successful reporting season. So with that, I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I'm sure there's probably been some in the chat, so
Yeah.
pass it over.
Yeah, Brendan, we have quite a few really good questions, so we can run through those. And between Brendan and myself, we will do our best to answer them all. So the first one was, are these requirements primarily for residential and commercial buildings? Is manufacturing excluded? Um, I can take that one quickly first, and Brendan, feel free to add in. Primarily, almost exclusively, these are for residential and commercial buildings, and I should clarify that it's for multifamily residential, not single family, and commercial buildings. As far as I know, there's only one or maybe two, with the addition, I think, of Santa Monica, that requires anything for manufacturing facilities, and that is Denver, which has sort of a different approach that they take. But that is rare, though. If you do have manufacturing, it's definitely worth figuring out if you do need to comply with any of these. Brendan, anything you would add there?
Yeah, no, I think most of them do cover generally commercial and mostly multifamily, but not always. So I think you
Right.
nailed it.
The next one, Brendan, somebody was asking, is the Santa Monica, California regulation a BPS or just a benchmarking requirement?
Only the benchmarking requirement is in place this year. I believe there's a BPS requirement in the legislation, but that is not set to come into effect for some time. I think 2030 at the earliest.
2030, I believe. Yeah. So always good to get ahead and get the benchmarking done as fast as you can, so you can see how far you're going to have to go to meet the BPS requirement. But it never hurts to get started early. Worst case, you're going to save some money, right?
Yeah.
So um, the next question, is there a list of all of the ordinances and dates? That's a really good question. Um, one way that you can find that very easily and make it very simple for you, that Brendan highlighted earlier, is if you sign up for a measurable free account, especially if you have your data in Portfolio Manager already, and just take a couple of minutes to sync it up. I've done it myself. It's very quick. You will see in the measurable free version, it will tell you right there which of your buildings are subject to any of these benchmarking requirements, and it'll give you the deadlines and the links to those. So That's probably the quickest way to know for your exact portfolio. But there are also separate lists. Probably the definitive list is maintained by IMT, the Institute for Market Transformation. You saw in one of our slides where I was highlighting the differences and the complexity map on that slide. That was the IMT map, and they have a table that goes along with that. So that is another way to do it. But again, if you use a measurable free account, it'll tell you for your exact portfolio and save you a little bit of time. So Brendan, there was another really good question. Somebody asked, by entering data into Energy Star Portfolio Manager, does that automatically mean that your data is filed and you are in compliance, or are there separate filing procedures?
Yeah, great question. The short answer is no, it does not mean that you're in compliance. Each program has its own specific means of how that data is shared with the program. What we see across most of these ordinances today is they utilize the sharing function in Energy Star, where you have to add the program as a contact and share access to that building and its data with the program. That just allows the program to, at any point, go in and see what data is in there and if it's compliant with the regulation. Other programs still utilize an actual submission feature where you'll generate a report in Energy Star. You'll have to go in and click submit. That kind of sends a form to the ordinance, but more and more we see the sharing function these days. But there is some amount of proactive effort that's needed. And some of the programs that, especially those who are incorporating BPS requirements, the performance standards, like Boston and New York, there's actually software and portals outside of Energy Star that you also need to submit to. So that's one of the reasons that, it's really important to make sure you have someone on your team or, a partner or service provider who's an expert, because every year we see new portals, new submission mechanisms, and it is not unified across the landscape.
Yeah, thanks. We have just a couple more questions, so now's the time to get any last questions in. I think Brendan and I discussed earlier, we're coming up on 1:30. If you need to leave us. We appreciate you being here, but if anybody wants to stay on, we're going to stay on and get through the rest of the questions. So the next one, Brendan, somebody asked, if measurable is already being used for ownership's ESG reporting, so meaning somebody's already using measurable as their tracking tool
Mhm.
for ESG data, will this filing service be implemented into that as well automatically?
Yeah, great question. It is an additional service on top of just the software subscription, because we do often have to gather data external to what you might be housing in the platform, and we set up and own this transfer of that data into Energy Star and the submission. So there is a fee on top of just the software, but implementation is definitely a lot easier once you're already in the software. I also see a question about the third-party verification and asking if we have staff that can serve as third-party verifiers in jurisdictions that require this. We do have CEMs and professional engineers on staff, and we do offer data verification services. The only caveat there is some programs are particular and say that the company that is doing the benchmarking report cannot also employ the third-party verifier. And so in those cases, we cannot do both. But other programs say that as long as the staff member who is doing the verification is not the same person working on the benchmarking report, then that is okay. So Boston, who has that data verification requirement this year, does allow for us to do both. But we keep those two teams who do each of those services are completely separate.
Thanks, Brendan. We just got one question that's very interesting. And for those who do have to sign off, we did just put a survey in the chat. So if you would take just a moment to fill that out, that would be very helpful for us. But Brendan, somebody just asked, How frequently does Measurable update its underlying building regulations data, the information that powers the functionality in the free and Measurable's paid services to show you which of your buildings have to comply with these laws?
Yeah, great question. We do that twice a year, sort of in Q4 and in Q1. We're just looking at anything that's passed in the legislation environment. And so we do a holistic update twice a year, but the sustainability reporting team that manages this day to day, as they flag any changes or updates, because it could be as simple as an extension from one program, we will make ad hoc updates to that list as we go. But we have, twice a year, we have holistic updates to make sure that we've refreshed that with any new programs or updates.
Yeah. Um, and then one last question. It's a bit broad, so I don't know how much we have the ability to get into this right now, but it basically just says, can you share the key updates on Maryland's BEPS, the Maryland Building Performance Standard?
Ooh, I don't want to get myself in trouble trying to remember the specifics of that one offhand.
Yeah,
It is,
Maryland's law is quite unique in a lot of the things that are exempted and things that, what has to be reported, what doesn't have to be reported. I know they were in the process of making some very significant changes to that.
yeah. And what I remember about that program is it's a bit of a rolling admission as to what buildings do need to comply. I think last year was the first batch of buildings that had to comply. There, I think there is a new, um, based on building type and size, there's a new batch of buildings that might need to start complying this year. What I know is that they do keep a really good set of resources. A lot of it is in short YouTube videos on what the latest is with their program and how to comply. So I would encourage you to check out their resources or drop us a question to our
Yeah,
support line, and we'd be happy to just give an answer once we're able to cross-reference it.
address your direct needs there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we're through all the questions, just a couple minutes over, but thank you all for being here with us today and taking the time to join us. Please get in touch with us if you have any questions about any of these requirements, if we can be of any help to you in filing, or if you just want to try out Measurable's free solution and see how that can benefit you, we'll be happy to help. So, um, Brendan, you can close us out.
Yeah, no, thank you all so much for joining us. Do feel free to reach out should you want any support or guidance coming into the reporting season. We know it's a lot, but we are always here to help. So thanks so much for taking time out of your day and hope you enjoy the rest of your week.